What is good, people? Welcome back to another video on 8 Count. In today's video, I'm going to be giving you my initial thoughts and reaction to the UFC 277 main card, which went down on Saturday night. As always, guys, if you enjoyed the video, please leave a like, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any of the upcoming content, and give me a comment down below if there's anything you want to see or talk about. But yeah, guys, let's get straight into it. It was a weird card for me. I just felt that I don't know, something was off with it in terms of maybe it was the pacing or something like that, because I was struggling, despite having some good fights. I just couldn't get into it like I normally am with a UFC, pay-per-view card. But we'll start with the main event. Amanda Nunes retains the UFC bantamweight title. Well, she's our new, isn't she? But she gets her title back. Amanda Nunes defeats Juliana Pena by decision. Some really wide margins. I think there was like a 50-43, I feel like. But yeah, it was a weird fight in terms of I really felt like Pena could have done more. And coming in, I expected a Nunes to win this and to win it quite handsomely, I guess you could say. And I think she did that. I think she was very impressive. I think Juliana has a lot of weapons which make her a threat to someone like Nunes. The fact that she can go at such a high pace and, drag the fight out. But, I think Nunes really had the equalizer and the power and the striking and, just that ability to give Pena that sort of warning at all times. And I think at times as well in the fight, her top game was really quite suffocating for Juliana Pena. Pena would throw up submissions and, she'd almost give up the omoplata on purpose just to get out the armbar because her defense of getting out the omoplata was so good and she was always able to maintain side control after it. So it was a really impressive performance by Amanda Nunes. But for me, Juliana Pena, her coaches let her down in this fight. It was an interesting battle on the feet at times because you'd see Nunes would want to get into exchanges on the feet, but Pena sometimes was getting the better of the two because she was throwing the straightest shots, and despite not having as much power or pop on her strike, she was doing a lot of, good work in my opinion, where, Nunes would maybe throw 3 or 4, but then Pena would come back with, a 1-2 down the middle, nice and straight. And because, Nunes was throwing the more loopy strikes, Pena was landing on the target first, and she was doing a great job of that. And to be fair to Amanda, she did a great job at kind of picking up what was going on. Then she started coming out in the southpaw stance where, she was able to use that check left hook almost, and, the lead left hook at times to really do some bad damage to Pena coming in. And for me, this is where Pena coaches let her down. I felt at times Pena was doing a great job at, leading, Amanda Nunes with some feints, and she was getting a reaction out of Nunes and getting her to throw the hook without it being there. And I felt like she just needed to take her time on the feet, because I felt like with Nunes looking to just throw the right hook, it was giving Pena an advantage because she was able to kind of get Nunes to wait on it, and she was able to land strikes at times after feinting and bringing out the right hook on Nunes. Her coaches wanted her to rush in, 1-2, rush in, and try and get to the clinch for takedown. But for me, I felt like this was a mistake because every time she'd rush in, she'd get caught. But when she was feinting and, playing a bit more of a tactical game on the feet, she was having a lot more success. And I kind of feel a bit disappointed in her coaches for the way they kind of went about it, because I feel like she could have got a win here even, or at least made the decision so much more closer. But fair play to Nunes, she did a great job, and fair play to Pena, she's actually won me round. I wasn't really a big fan of her. I don't know, I just think her personality sometimes leaves a little too, I guess you could say, and sometimes her fighting style's the same. I think I've in the past, and I've seen her, and I've kind of been disappointed just because of the hype surrounding her and the performance she's given. But she's definitely got a fan in me now, and for me, she's just such a dog. And the way, well, not like a munter, but a dog in terms of she's got spirit and heart. But she was yeah, man, she showed no quitting there. I think she was brilliant in terms of on her back, never quitting, never just, sitting there. You know, I think she could have done a bit of a better job and maybe looking to get to the feet at times off her back instead of throwing up submissions every time. She had the on the platter a couple times, but never really got close with it. I think the closest attempt she probably had was the armbar in round 3 or 4, which was really, you know, looked in there for a second. But Nunes with amazing jiu-jitsu defense. But Pena, you know, after this fight, she's calling for the rematch, and I think a lot of people are laughing her off in terms of how do you get a rematch after losing the 50-43 sort of decision. And I kind of understand where they're going from with that, but in other ways, I kind of wouldn't mind seeing a rematch. I think Nunes is a fighter who is at the peak of the division, and in my opinion, she's got a skill set where I think someone's going to come along and beat her eventually. I just feel like in the bigger women's weight classes, you know, 135 and 145, even above 155, there's just a lack of, I guess you could say, talent in some ways. You know, like the lower weight classes for the female divisions, there's an array of stars. And I think it's like the men as well. You look at, I guess you could say, maybe middleweight and up, you know, the amount of talent and the pool is a lot less than you see at 135, 125, 155, 145. Do you know what I mean? And it is what it is. I just didn't really see anyone who's a real number one contender right now in the rankings. I could be wrong and maybe I'm missing something. And if so, fair play. You know, Nunes can move on and defend against the number one contender. However, I do feel like the division's a bit stagnant at the moment. And I think Juliana, with a few changes, really could, you know, still beat Nunes. So it's not one I'm laughing at. And I'd like to see a third fight, even despite the outrageous, well, not outrageous, but such widespread scorecards. But yeah, I feel like a trilogy could be fun for this one, but not as a main event. I'd like to see it backed up by a bit of a bigger main event. I just didn't get the main event feeling with this sort of fight, and maybe that's just me. And it's not because it's a women's fight, because I feel like if it was a strawweight women's title, I'd love it as a main event. I just feel like maybe the bantamweight's not really made for it, and I don't know how the pay-per-view numbers are going to do. I'm not sure what sort of star power both of these girls had, because I don't think it really would have sold well, especially coming from the UK. I don't feel like Amanda Nunes is like the biggest star, but maybe she is in, you know, with her Brazilian sort of fan base and maybe in America and stuff like that. We'll move on to the co-main event, and it got fight of the night, and I think that's fair enough. It was a fun one on the feet between Brandon Moreno and KaraFrance, and you know, it was an interesting one. Coming in, I did think Brandon Moreno was going to win. I completely forgot about the fight in 2019, to be honest. But for me, KaraFrance, I thought coming in, he had less ways to win, and he would, you know, I felt like that give a big sort of advantage to Brandon Moreno, because you know he can get it done on the feet, he can get it done in the grappling, and it makes him so dangerous. I think under James Krause now, I think that's a brilliant move for him. James Krause is definitely one of the best coaches in MMA at this very moment in time. You look at the crop of fighters that he's got, despite not being, you know, the top of the food chain sort of guys, you see the work he's done with them and improving them. So yeah, I really like the move for Brandon Moreno, and you know, congrats to, I guess, both of them on their first sort of, well, Moreno getting another title and Krause on his first kind of title fight. But KaraFrance did some good work in the fight. You know, I think they made a lot about the sort of stance change from Moreno and how when he would, you know, kind of lengthen the stance, KaraFrance would look to land with those leg kicks. And despite having trouble finding Moreno at times, I think KaraFrance was doing some good work to the leg kicks, but someone like Moreno is so tough, you're never going to really know if they're having any effect on him. I think Brandon Moreno in the striking, he does a great job of, you know, using his length at 125, in my opinion. You know, the strikes that he uses, I think he did a great job of making KaraFrance more defensive fighter, pushing him up into the back foot. And it was a really good win for me. You know, Brandon Moreno definitely got hurt at some point in I think it was the third round. You know, I think it was, he threw a kick and KaraFrance caught it, and there was a beautiful little sweep into the full guard, and you can see kind of the evolution in KaraFrance in his ground game, because it was like no time at all when he was throwing ground and pound strikes, he cut open Moreno pretty bad on the one cheek. And and Moreno looked for, I think it was an armbar or triangle, can't remember, but it was a good use of jiu-jitsu, not necessarily to get the submission, but in terms of to get the stand up. And he got that, but there was a moment where he was kind of on all fours and he was kind of moving his head, and KaraFrance was teeing off on him, and it looked like he kind of had Moreno in a bit of a spot of bother for a while, but it just didn't last, and Moreno was able to get forward and find his rhythm again, because I feel like at one point in the fight, he definitely kind of lost. I'd say concentration, probably, because he kind of just let the fight get away from him. He wasn't really sticking to the game plan, but which he had set. But he got back after it. He was able to do the work where he wanted. He got the finish in the end with a left body kick, which was absolutely picture perfect. And, you could see the amount of struggle KaraFrance was in. And it was a shame to see the fight end like that for KaraFrance as someone who's worked so hard to get to this position. But I feel like he's probably a good enough fighter to get to another title shot in the future, and I hope he does, because he seems like a genuinely nice guy. So it'd be nice to see him in another title shot. But for Brandon Moreno, this sets up the quadrilogy. There's another word for it, but I can't remember what they said, and the pronunciation looked too hard. But they said it could be called a quadrilogy. So I'm going to go with that. With him and Figueiredo, and if Figueiredo can make the weight, I'm all down for it. The first fight was a close fight. The point was taken. It was given a draw. Moreno won the rematch pretty handsomely. And in the trilogy fight, Figueiredo got a decision, which is kind of a disputed one online. A lot of people believe that Moreno won, but a lot of people believe Figueiredo won as well. I think they're probably the two best guys right now in the division, without a doubt. And it's going to be a huge fight. I think Brandon Moreno is a star. I think if you would have told me that 5 years ago, I would have said bollocks. But you look at the sort of reception he gets as a Mexican fighter, coming from Mexico as well. He's not of Mexican heritage. He's not an American Mexican. I don't know how do you call it? Like someone like Cain Velasquez, who has grew up in America, but has a Mexican family. Kind of like me. I've grew up in England, but I've got a Welsh family. But Brandon Moreno is from Mexico. He trained in Mexico for a long time, now training in the States, and he's a huge star. I love his walkout track, his own kind of song for him. I think it's a brilliant track to come out to. And I think this quadrilogy is going to do really well. I hope they get it on a card in which it can really shine, though. I'd hate for it to be on a card like this where, it could maybe doesn't get the shine it deserves. But Brandon Moreno versus Figueiredo is an intriguing fight, and definitely the two top guys in the division at the moment. I think it's going to be a good fight as well. I think Moreno is probably more likely to take it, but you just never know with Figgy. He's such a dangerous fighter. We move on to Derek Lewis against Sergey Pavlovich, and I went with Derek Lewis, and to be honest, looking back on it, I think, well, that was a stupid pick, because I've just gone with Lewis off name value and not the actual skills. Because if you look at the skill sets of each fighter, Sergey is the more well-rounded, the more technical of the two. And Derek Lewis, relies on that God-given power and the athleticism that he has in the heavyweight division. And looking back on it, it was a bad pick from me. I think Sergey Pavlovich, he gets this win, and it was a massive win in his career. A lot of people having a go at the stoppage, and it's kind of mixed reactions. And I feel like the reactions are way worse because of the way Joe Rogan kind of confronted Sergey. I didn't think it was fair on his part, the way he kind of went about it, asking Sergey. I think he probably could have done it in a, I guess you could say, slightly more respectful way, because it was kind of taken away from his victory, which is legitimate in my opinion. I think Derek Lewis is a big star, and people are always going to have his back, and they're going to call it early, and I think that's fair enough. But in my opinion, he's getting up, he gets up, he's face down on the floor. At that stage in a fight, the body language is as bad as it can get. I don't have a problem with, I think it was Dan Mergliotta who stopped the fight. If you see someone in that position, he wasn't defending himself, it looks really fucking bad. So I'm not surprised he stopped the fight. People going on about he gets straight back up. I think that's fine, but the fact is, if Dan didn't stop him, Pavlovich was coming in for following strikes and more damage for Derek Lewis. Of course, it's devastating that Derek Lewis has kind of lost this fight because his record as of late isn't looking the best. Obviously, losing that fight to Cyril Gane with such a poor performance, and then losing that kind of brawl with Taito Ivasa and the knockout the way it was awful. And now losing to a guy like Sergey Pavlovich, and despite, kind of being one of the outside sort of contenders, this guy is skilled and definitely one of the better heavyweights in the division at this moment in time. But recently, when Derek Lewis goes up against these sort of contenders, he gets the win and he makes a statement. But he didn't tonight. And I wonder if, time has caught up to Derek Lewis and, seeing him fighting at the highest levels kind of over. I don't ever think he was the best fighter in terms of skill set, but he was always a favourite of people's because he put on a show. And I think it's just the way he is as a person. He seems so just fucking relatable in the fact that, in the way that he's just kind of funny without being trying to be funny. He's just a funny guy. The work that he does outside of fighting, I think I can't remember, it was some sort of flooding in Houston and he had the big vehicle so he was able to go and help people and, stuff like that kind of really shows what sort of a man he is. And I hope he could, if he's going to continue on, he can get a fight where he is, in a position to get a big win, because I think that's what he needs at this moment in time. Huge win for Sergey Pavlovich. Moving up, it's going to be an interesting fight for him next. I'm not sure what they're going to want to do. I think with Curtis Blades, the victory over Tom Aspinall being kind of disputed, I think Sergey Pavlovich versus Curtis Blades would be an interesting one, considering that I know Cyril Gane's got a fight, right? So I don't know. It's an interesting one. Give him whoever. Give him someone in the top 5 though, for sure. Because his striking is kind of nice because he's obviously got that big power, but he's kind of loose with his striking, and it's not often you see people like that. We'll move on to Alejandro Pantoja against Alex Perez, and Pantoja was fighting like he had a dinner reservation somewhere because he just went forward straight away, swinging. I think both men got in a couple decent shots on the feet, but it was Pantoja who was able to get the back, and that submission looked horrible. It made my teeth hurt watching it. I mean, Pantoja is a dangerous guy. I picked Perez. I had an awful fucking night on the picks, but I picked Perez just because I felt like his ability to strike at range with the use of leg kicks was going to be important, but also his wrestling ability. If he wanted to, he could take the fight to the ground and try and use his top pressure. And I felt Pantoja would have a tough time taking him down, but he ends up getting on the backpack and finishing it there. And I think it's a disappointing one for Perez, and I still think he's an interesting fighter in this flyweight division. And I think he got to the title shot a bit premature against Figgy, but you can kind of understand it in that timeline. But he's definitely going to have to hit the reset button here and see, what he can do next. But in terms of a loss, this isn't like an awful loss to take in terms of the damage he took during the fight. But Pantoja, on the other hand, this is a huge win for him. Able to do it in such quick a quick way and get the finish. It's going to be huge. And his next fight's the big one because it could be a number 1 contender fight. I have some matchups I really like. I think Alex Perez, because kind of both guys are kind of undamaged from this fight, despite it being a really quick stoppage. I'd like to see Alex Perez take on Matt Schnell. I think that fight would be really interesting, actually. And I think they got to do Pantoja versus Royval, Raw Dog Royval. And I fancy Royval in that one, to be honest. But I think Royval is, in my opinion, deserving of a number 1 contender fight. You look at the only fight he lost, I believe it was against whatchamacallit? Oh, who did Royval lose against? Oh, Brandon Moreno. I don't think he's taken a loss since then. So for me, I would like to see him get a number one contender fight, because even the stoppage of Royval was an injury with the arm. So yeah, I'd like to see him get that one back. Pantoja beat him. I can't even remember that. God, that was a while back. So he lost 2 in a row. I'd like to see the Pantoja fight again. I still think that's a good matchup. Yeah, I don't know. It's a tough one, but that's still a fight I'd like to see again. Pantoja Royval, number one contender fight, potentially, because the win against Bontorin is a good one, and so is the win over Machinal, in my opinion. Maybe not a number one contender fight. We'll have to wait and see. I don't really mind, but Pantoja and Perez should both be looking to get back into the action quickly, in my opinion, taking no damage and being in good shape already. I think that's prime time for both guys. Move on to the last fight on the main card. Ankalaev defeats Anthony Smith by second round TKO. In my opinion, this is such a shame that the injury happened. I'm not sure, and I haven't been keeping up to date on what's happened, but he suffered some sort of leg injury. I think I'm not too sure when it happened, if it's a check or whatnot. I heard something about it being the last kick he threw in the round, so I looked on social media, and there was one sort of up kick where he kind of hits his heel into the canvas, and I wonder, did he maybe, I don't know, break the fibia or the tibia? Because he's talking about a leg break, but it's clearly not. Well, it's not a break of the tibia and fibia, because we would have seen some sort of McGregor shit or Silver shit. But yeah, it was an interesting one. But in my opinion, Ankalaev took a really close round one. Anthony Smith coming into this fight was talking about space and where Ankalaev does his best work, and he does it backing people up. And he had to take the space away from him. I think he did a good job in round one. He was quite cautious, but it was a tight round. I think Ankalaev, especially with the work of some of the leg kicks he was landing to a downed opponent, and Anthony Smith at the end of the round giving the round. The second round, obviously, Anthony Smith is compromised with the injury, but I loved the pressure he put on, and it was a shame he couldn't really stick with the striking, because with that sort of pressure he was putting on Ankalaev, he could have had a lot of success. But he's kind of forced into a position where he had to pull guard, and it's such a shame, because I think with a guy like Ankalaev, it's not unbeatable to beat him off your back, as Paul Craig showed, but I think the best way to beat him in a grappling scenario is going to be putting him on his back, because his top pressure is so heavy. Such a athletic guy as well at about 285. It's a tough fight. Van Kalaev next. I think, in all honesty, he needs one more before a title shot, and if they're going to run back Glover versus Yuri, Jan Blachowicz versus Magomed Ankalaev for the number one contender spot is a fight I fucking love. I'd love to see that fight. I think it'd be super fun, and I think on the feet it'd be interesting, because I think Ankalaev is actually the quicker of the two. I think Jan would probably overrule in the striking. I think his style's a little bit tighter, and it's, I could see him catching Ankalaev. I could see it the other way round. It'd be an interesting fight. I'd love to see that. For Anthony Smith, I just hope he recovers soon. I've seen him on the Mike Bisbee podcast. Seems like a great guy. So nothing but the best to him. But yeah, as always, guys, if you enjoyed the video, please leave a like. I kind of dragged on a bit here today, so sorry. Subscribe to the channel, you don't miss any of the upcoming content. I've got my picks coming out maybe tomorrow or Wednesday for Hill versus Santos, which is a really fun one. Well, it could be fun. It could be kind of one-sided in my opinion. But so be sure to come check that out. Give me a comment down below if there's anything you want to see. And I'll see you on Tuesday or Wednesday. Peace out. Have a great rest of your week.